In the session today, I am joined by Hannah Bland. Hannah is the campaign manager at a climate charity called Possible. And for many of us, tussling with the whole sustainability thing and trying to bring it into the mainstream within our businesses and organizations, one of the big challenges is having something that is accessible and that makes a difference. And today we are going to be talking about a such thing. It is something called climate perks. But we'll come on to that in a little while because I want to hear a little bit more about Hannah. So welcome to the episode, Hannah.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me on.
So the charity, before we get into the detail about obviously climate perks, which I think is going to really resonate with a lot of people looking to get on this journey of making a difference and actually doing practical things, because that often is the hardest thing when it comes to sustainable initiatives. Tell me a little bit more about Possible, because a charity set up purely for the aim of sustainability and becoming and advocating sort of climate change. It sounds like quite a place to be.
It's great. It's an interesting part of the movement. We're sort of stubborn optimists, always looking for solutions. So Possible, we started about 10 years ago now, just over 10 years ago, in 2009. Off of the back, there was a movie called The Age of Stupid, which is it's sort of a comedy, dark comedy, looking at what's going to happen sort of in 10 years. Everyone's like, why didn't you do anything? It sort of shows what will happen if we don't do anything on the climate crisis and the sort of terrible situations the terrible consequences that will happen. And it was a really good movie. But sort of off the back of that, people are like, okay, great. So now what? What do we do? And we're realizing that there wasn't a space at that point in the climate movement for positive actions that everyday people can take. And so that is when we started a campaign at that time called 1010. And it was to get everybody's carbon emissions down by 10% by 2010. And so we had loads of different things. We worked with businesses, communities, individuals, and everyone sort of became part of this campaign. And we were kind of coming up with positive things they could do. And then it sort of just carried on since then. And so in 2019, we changed our name when it became 10 years anniversary. It was sort of becoming a bit depressing to still be called 1010, always having to explain this thing 10 years ago. So that's why we're now called Possible, and we sort of slightly changed our angle a bit. We're still very much the positive. Sometimes we're, helping schools get solar panels, planting trees in flood-affected areas, and also doing some sort of policy-oriented campaigns as well. So at the moment in England, it's very difficult to get a wind turbine. So we had a big campaign around changing the legal sort of framework, which makes it difficult to get wind power. So there's a real range of work that we do, but just for a small charity, but it's great fun.
So this is fascinating, because I guess with all those fingers and so many pies, I guess you get this opportunity to kind of spot stuff that others might not if they're working, down one sort of particular stream of the sustainable kind of initiatives, obviously, that are going on now. But everything from wind turbines to working in schools, it's a really broad remit. Is this something that's been quite kind of conscious to just try and really make a difference everywhere? Because it sounds really, well, one, very positive and very ambitious, but just really quite fascinating that you get exposure to so many different ideas and concepts and people.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's the case. There's sort of two angles for that, and one of which is that we just have to do everything. Climate change is going to affect every aspect of our life, and it does mean that changes in all sorts, from how we're getting around to what's powering our homes to what we're eating. Like, everything is impacting the environment, and so that's where the action is needed. But then there's another sort of aspect, which is we need to engage everyone, right? It's not we sort of want to build a better, cleaner, fairer future, and to do that we need everyone involved. And so when you do have like a broad spectrum of projects, it means there's always sort of something for someone. And we find that people get interested in one particular thing. Maybe they like working outdoors and they come along to our tree planting project, and then they realize, it actually feels really great and motivating to be doing something positive about climate. And so then they'll come in through that way and start, I don't know, lobbying their local politicians about onshore wind. So yeah, it's really nice to have that spread. Sometimes it feels a bit of a bit daunting to have a lot of things to have to do. But yeah, I think it's important. People have to do it, so we're doing that.
And I guess one of the trends, I mean, if we call it that maybe possibly came to sort of indicate to you that something like Climate Perks was going to be, very, very relevant and a really, really powerful campaign. It's again, this whole idea about trying to touch on everybody so that they can kind of take away a little piece of, something that's relevant to them, because unless it resonates to you or for you, it's really hard to kind of get that motivation, because everybody will say, oh, I'm so busy, I've got so much on, and climate crisis, yes, but we've got economic crisis as well, and I can't afford to pay the bills, and there's always seems to be a distraction, doesn't there? So I guess you must kind of see with something like Climate Perks, which we will tell everybody about in just a moment, it must be that you kind of sort of think, right, we're really honing in here on something that can have a major and quite profound impact across many styles and sizes of organization. Was that the kind of thinking behind it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think just on that, what you say, like, it's right. People sometimes think that the climate crisis is something separate to economic struggles and other sort of feelings that feel more immediate to a lot of people. And I think that's kind of a lot of our projects are kind of focused on the sort of the co-benefits, because people might, for example, you gave economic struggles like heating your home, that bills are really expensive, but that's actually very tied to renewable. It could be made much easier if we did have onshore wind, for example, and could get cheaper power sourced by, I live in the UK. It was really windy weather, so renewable, and it would be much cheaper if we were allowed to have onshore wind turbines more and didn't have to rely on imported oil and gas. So they are really connected, and when we can tap into what people really care about and people's immediate needs, then you can sort of put the pieces together and realize, like, actually, I think there's a misconception sometimes that people feel like taking action on the climate means limiting yourself, or you're not allowed to do certain things. And actually, there's a lot of positive benefits of positive action on climate change. You can have cheaper bills, healthy foods, like enjoying like tree planting and slower travel. And yeah, there's a lot of benefits. It's not all about just like limiting yourself or making your quality of life any worse.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do misinterpret that. I think I probably did right at the start of my journey, and I'm far from perfect in this. We're working on it. I'm on a journey, but I think what you're kind of intimating is that the most important thing is to, one, make a start, but two, just realize it is the little things. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm going to take this, complete career change, and I'm going to do something really radical, and we're going to stop doing a whole bunch of stuff, like I'm never going to travel, etc. It clearly doesn't have to be like that. And there's a really quite interesting point that you make about this kind of interlinking between various things, because they are. Once you stop and think about them, you realize actually everything is connected. It really is genuinely connected. And I think that's quite a wake-up moment, I think, has been for me, and certainly for a lot of people, sort of on this, the starting out of the journey, because let's face it, most of us are just starting out on this journey, even though we might have been sort of aware of it for many years. I think a lot of people are feeling maybe a little guilty that they didn't get on board earlier. So I think it's kind of initiatives like the one we're just about to talk about, and we will talk about Climate Perks, is that, it's just about knowing what options you have. So if you're in an organization and you're doing any form of travel, there is this service, campaign, networking opportunity. How would you describe Climate Perks? Tell us a little bit more about what it is, and then kind of how it sort of comes into this main debate about sustainability.
Yeah, so Climate Perks is, how would I describe it? It's actually the name of our network of employers, and so it starts with the acknowledgement that flying is really bad for the climate. It's one of the most sort of high carbon activities that you can do, and so we want, at Possible, we want to encourage people to change their travel behaviors so that they're choosing more trains and coaches, ferries, sort of just getting around without flying, wherever it's possible. And one of the key barriers to that, we found, was that it just takes longer. I'm someone who loves to travel, but having a limited amount of annual leave, I don't want to spend it all on the train. So a lot of people want to fly so they can just zip to some sunny location, spend 2 weeks there, and then zip back. So realizing that, we started working with employers and businesses of all different types and sizes, to ask them to give their staff sort of extra time off work, as in sort of HR benefit. So you get paid days on top of your annual leave for the traveling, so that it doesn't eat into your sort of precious holiday time. So I used this last month. I went to Madrid, and to fly there would just take a few hours. But I wanted to take the train, and you have to go to Paris, then to Barcelona, and then to Madrid. So it would take all day. And so I asked my manager, I filled in a quick form, which is part of the Climate Perks scheme. And it's like, how long does it take by plane? How long does it take by your method? And then the time difference would then be given back to me as paid leave, instead of cutting into my annual leave. And so, yeah, so that's like the concept at its basis, and that's how it started. And we got loads of interest from businesses, because they're increasingly seeing that their employees want action on climate change, and they want to find things that they can give their employees to show that they're serious. And this is quite a simple concept, which is, say, 2 days a year for your employees. But now it's sort of growing, so that we also provide a lot of resources and support for people who don't always know sort of how you might get to Madrid, for example, without flying. And so we offer that support, give people resources. And now we have a couple of sort of environmental friendly travel companies that are partnering with us to give discounts as well, to sort of further incentivize those sort of climate friendly holidays.
So how, I come back to some of the sort of the details for employers in just a minute, but I'm curious as to kind of that journey, which, is obviously a really, really interesting comparison, because, if you fly from UK to Madrid, like you say, a few hours in the air, but the actual journey, I'm guessing, because obviously there's travel time to the airport, there's the long lingering time, which seems to be ever increasing actually at the airport, the inevitable short, maybe slightly longer delay. It's not just 2 to 3 hours, is it? But the complete elapsed time, I think a lot of people forget, and they might be thinking, oh, well, it's going to be taking me ages longer. But once you're at the station, hop on the train, the journey's already begun. And so how was it in terms of the actual experience?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm fair. Only in the last few years that I've started taking long distance train. I used to fly everywhere. It's terrible. I didn't really know how bad it was. But I love it now. I don't want to go back. You're right. I used to, being in airports is slow. It can be stressful. It's also quite disorientating getting onto a flight, and then all of a sudden you're in a new city or a new country. Whereas, getting on the train, got in central London, you get on at St Pancras. That's just 2-hour train, very comfortable. There's a cafe car where you can get like drinks and just stand or stretch your legs. And then you're in the middle of Paris, where you can get, a croissant or something, French, if you want to enjoy Paris. And then there was I think it was 6-7 hours train from Paris to Barcelona, which, that is a long time for a train. But it was very comfortable. Again, we got tables. There's a cafe, and I was right next to the window, and just actually seeing the country, like rolling past through countries instead of sort of going over the top of them, is just such a lovely experience, just to watch the sort of the time go by and be like mindful of what you're going past. We actually went that trip. I didn't realize you go past like this area. There was loads of flamingos. I didn't expect to see flamingos in Spain. There was loads, so that was beautiful. And then also just going through all the stations in southern France and Spain. And then, well, on the way there, we actually decided to stay the night in Barcelona, so we could have a swim in the morning in the sea, and then hop on. There's like quite regular trains then to Madrid, which is a couple of hours away. And again, that was just, it just felt much like, yeah, I was going to say slower, which it is slower, but like also just felt slower in a kind of more grounded again, all of these words. Yeah, it just felt more like mindful and more healthy really than just like being stuck inside an airport without windows and then on a plane and then in a bus. And then, yeah, it just felt much easier. And then you're straight in the center of the city. Yeah, it was really, really lovely experience. And my partner, who doesn't get the extra days off work, he loves it too. So he's always like very keen to be going by train instead, even though it is eating into his annual leave.
Isn't this interesting? It kind of almost redefines, I guess, long haul travel is a bit of a different conversation, but in terms of the kind of short to medium or sort of intercontinental, intracontinental, I suppose is the word, travel, then this sort of opens up, as you say, with the flamingos. I mean, I just had this vision in my head of something that you would never normally encounter unless you made a real effort to go there. So the surprises that you're going to uncover kind of en route and maybe open up new ideas for different journeys or different visits the next time. And yeah, this sounds, I mean, over and above, obviously the carbon thing is, vitally important, but I think there's always something kind of behind these kinds of initiatives that means it's a good thing to do, not just for climate, but actually, as you say, for feeling grounded, feeling more connected with the places that you're traveling through and to. This just feels like there's no reason not to do it now, doesn't it, really? And I think certainly here in the UK, a lot of us will have typically taken short flights from one end to the other, where you can kind of within an hour and a half or so, you can literally cover the whole distance of the UK on a plane. Whereas, obviously going by train, it's going to take you 8 or 9 hours, sort of end to end. But again, you're going to see things that you would never have seen. Really, really interesting. I'd not really looked at it. I knew the practicality of climate perks, but then I didn't really consider the subjective kind of experience, which feels, just really quite special. Really, really interesting. So what kind of organizations, businesses, companies are kind of signing up to the network?
We have most UK, but we do have increasingly more outside of the UK and Europe and further afield. But there's a bit of a mix. We do have quite a lot of environmental organizations, some of the first to sign up, and it's sort of environmental consultancies. And we have a lot of sort of, about half of them are charities that sign up. And then another half are sort of private sector businesses. A lot environmental, but there's a big chunk of sort of marketing and digital agencies that sign up. I think often that sector is quite keen to look after its staff and try new things. It's sort of that startup vibe. We have a lot of that kind of organization that are, keen to try out new practices and redefine what it means to be an employer. And so we also, we have a lot of like marketing digital agencies, a couple of sort of healthcare organizations. And then we more recently have the Climate Change Committee, which is a civil service organization in the UK. They are the government's climate advisors. So that was quite exciting because we're really keen to get more local councils on board. I know a lot of local authorities want to join. The NHS, lots of trusts get in touch. They want to join as well. But it maybe takes a bit longer for those organizations to sign up. So it's really helpful for us to have a civil service organization already on board. But it's a real mix and for different reasons, mostly around seeing that they need to show they're serious on climate and seeing this as a simple and quite inexpensive way to do that also engages their staff.
And I suppose in lots of ways, the whole change, well, the fundamental change of working, particularly for those of us who have got a sort of an indoor office computer-based job, as it were, the whole kind of way of working from, being originally office-based to then kind of, remote working through pandemic, and then hybrid has come out the other side as being a thing. Obviously, a lot of people also work, remotely now. I guess this kind of flexibility in working styles has kind of played into your favor, because people would then think about that kind of full day journey from the UK to Madrid and think, well, actually, okay, it is about watching the countryside rolling by happily alongside me, but actually I can get a bit of work done too, or I can read that book that's been sat gathering dust on the shelf, and actually this is going to be some real quality time. I can maybe think about stuff for once, and I never get a chance to do that. But also, because of connectivity, I can actually maybe do a little bit of work en route. So I've just sort of triggered off my thought there for the digital marketing agencies, because a lot of those are going to be now, hybrid working, and very familiar with kind of working on trains and every cafe you can imagine. So that kind of must have really played into your hands as this being the moment. Because if you tried this back in 10 days, it probably wouldn't really have kind of caught on as well. Would you think?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think since the coronavirus pandemic, people are more aware of being digitally connected. Like a lot more people are questioning, sort of, because business flights is another angle. We don't really work on it much, but we often advise our employers and members about how they can sort of decarbonize their business travel. And I think, as there's more conversations happening around not flying for work, that people are also thinking about not flying in their like personal life as well. And as you say, with people being more digitally connected, they're also able to travel by train. Although sometimes that means employers will sometimes come to us and be like, well, why do our staff need extra days off if they can just work from the train? So that's sort of another angle. I mean, we encourage that for organizations that can, but for many employees, including if you're traveling as a family, like with children, you might not want to be working on the day that you're traveling. But it's definitely opened things up and made it more flexible for people. That just wouldn't have been an option for flying.
So it's really interesting, and it does feel, again, I guess, the whole possible charity sort of ethos about just being flexible and exploring and just being part of a moving movement. And I think this is really interesting. Can't put those two words together, but it kind of works here, because it is evolving, isn't it? And I think you're going to see a lot of change over how people pick this up, and where the kind of the real sweet spots are. There'll be certain industries that will really get this, others that might take a little bit longer, certain types of demographic of sort of the people who are going to be using the service actively, is going to obviously give you some really interesting insights going forward. So yes, fascinating stuff. So how do people get in contact with you? How do people sign up, find out more, learn and experience Climate Perks?
So we have a website. It's www.climateperks.com. So very simple URL there. And on the page, there is, you can register interest there, and you just type your name and email address in, and then I'll get back to you with some information and some resources. Also, you can find us. So Possible, the charity that I work for, so Climate Perks has its own website, as I just said, but we also have Possible, which you can find at wearepossible.org. And we're also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I think we're just now on TikTok. So you can find us on social media as well. You can email at hello@climateperks.com as well. And then all of those ways you'll get through to me. We're not a very big team, and I'm the person who runs the Climate Perks project. So I'd be happy to help. When someone signs up, we send them a sort of template policy for what it looks like for their team to implement the scheme. And then we just sort of go from there. But it's a very sort of quick process. And if you have questions, then you can email them or send them through the website.
It's wonderful, really, really good. And I think, as I said right at the start of this conversation, it's so good to have something that's really accessible, can make such a great difference, and yeah, just challenge our thinking. I think as citizens, I was going to say consumers. I don't use the word consumers anymore because consuming stuff is not good. So it's citizens. As citizens, I think we can all, yeah, just keep our minds and eyes and ears open to these possibilities. And I think, I would certainly be advocating strongly looking at climateperks.com, because I think it's a really fascinating sort of insight into the changing travel industry. And I think, I can imagine this as having a long and very prosperous and yes, beneficial life as a campaign. I think it's become more than a campaign, hasn't it, really? This is a movement in itself, isn't it? So
Yeah.
thank you very much for your time today, Hannah. It's been really fascinating. Also hearing about the journey to Madrid, because I think, again, just those practical kind of little examples always really, really help everybody to kind of understand really what this is all about. So thank you, Hannah, for your time.
Thank you, Neil. It's been great.